and welcome to my Positive Life Answers podcast. Welcome to episode 4, Optimism Habits Made Easy, part 2. I'm your podcast host and expert, Dr. Ann Mercer, and you can call me Dr. Mary, as many people do. In my Positive Life Answers podcast, my goal is to help you transform the quality of your life and help you create the life you desire. The goal of my podcast is to help you make improvements and changes in practical ways. In today's podcast, we will explore Optimism Habits Made Easy, Part 2. Thank you for your support since releasing my first few episodes. Please continue to enjoy my podcasts and don't keep me a secret. Please share my podcast with somebody who can benefit from these topics and advice. Thank you for your email messages and questions. That's what this space is all about, which is helping you. So your participation and feedback is important to me in order to guide and help you. So I appreciate that. Last time we talked about some keys to Optimism Habits Made Easy. I shared in episode 3, Optimism Habits Made Easy Part 1, a few of my 60-second techniques to become upbeat and optimistic, and optimism and happiness by the numbers. Today we'll talk about more Optimism Habits Made Easy, such as more 60-second techniques, an important key to being optimistic, the rule of change, and a question from the listeners. I selected one question from a listener which really reflects what it says about these techniques, habits, and kind of roadblocks some people might be experiencing, as well as a little resistance to change within themselves. So we'll explore all that today. Remember, when you face a problem, solutions don't always come easy. When you can't find solution to your problems or way to cope and change your life, I can guide and help you by offering you solution-focused systems and tools to create the change in the life you desire. So you don't need to use the psychotherapy to feel more hopeful and optimistic. You just need these 60-second techniques and tips that we started to learn about last time. You're learning 5 key techniques to feel spontaneously optimistic and happy. You can benefit from these in a few ways. First, if you did nothing except these tips, you should feel noticeably more upbeat and happy. Second, you'll find it really vastly easier to make improvements and bounce back in your life in difficult times, as I show you in the following episodes, when you feel more optimistic. After all, when you're in a positive state of mind, you're more open to helpful ideas, and you're more likely to experiment with new ways to change and improve your life. And those are the things we'll start exploring in upcoming podcast episodes. In my unique intensive-like coaching sessions with hundreds of clients over the years, I always incorporate the use of these techniques. And it never ceases to amaze me how these simple tactics help people build a basic foundation for which they can vastly improve their lives with more confidence and strength. To review, we have covered so far the following 60-second techniques last time. We're going to go over them briefly, just so that it becomes more natural and ingrained in your mind, so that you can start practicing these more naturally. But for more detail on these techniques, please go to my last episode 3 on Optimism Habits Made Easy Part 1. But briefly, here they were. Technique number 1, use straight posture. Depressed and pessimistic people, we found, slouch. Their shoulders roll forward and their heads hang down. They cast their gaze down and they take shallow breaths. Optimistic people are totally the opposite. They use straight posture. They keep their heads up, shoulders back, chests out. They look forward and don't gaze down at the ground. And they breathe easily and freely. Most clients who come to me for my unique intensive life coaching sessions walk in my office slouch. I immediately tell them, and in fact, my co-author and I in our book, Spontaneous Optimism, use the following phrase. Before you can straighten out your head, you need to straighten out your body. So briefly, my recommendation was to continuously observe and check your body posture throughout the day. It takes only a second to accomplish. When you notice when you're standing or sitting that you slouch, your mood will take a dive and you're not breathing easily and deeply. When you notice that, immediately straighten up your posture. This is the first step to boosting your mood. Technique number 2 was use upbeat and cheerful tone of voice. An incredibly useful but seldom publicized psychological insight is that a person feels whatever emotion they're acting at the moment. Therefore, when you want to feel upbeat and happy, act upbeat and happy. If you want to feel romantic, act and take on the behaviors of a romantic person. If you want to feel sad, and act sad and talk slowly and just slow down, and you'll feel your mood take a dive and your energy take a dive, and you'll feel sad and depressed. A report from the Harvard Mental Health Letter reviewed research that supports the psychological insight that I'm teaching you. The report revealed that research reported that it shows and appears possible to act happier by acting out the traits of happy people. And there were 4 key traits of happy people. Happy people have high self-esteem. Happy people feel in control of their lives. Happy people are optimistic. Happy people are more outgoing. In an experiment they reviewed, it was found that people who pretend that they have high self-esteem began to feel better about themselves. Also, in other studies, researchers who were told to smile as part of an experiment actually felt happier. I feel a good way to feel instantly optimistic is to use an upbeat and cheerful tone of voice. So just think about it. When you speak in a serious tone of voice, you feel serious. When you talk into a depressed person who uses a slow, low, down tone of voice, you'll feel slow down and you'll feel sad. An optimistic person injects cheerfulness into his or her voice, and you immediately feel cheerful and optimistic yourself. Technique number 3 was use upbeat words. Remember, words often affect your emotions and attitudes. You can use 3 types of words that are either one of these 3 categories. Words can be neutral, but they can be positive and negative. So you have words that are positive, neutral, or negative. And it's important to understand that because words are really hypnotic. Watch what you're saying to yourself every day. Are you saying to yourself negative words or positive words? If you're in the negative zone, let's try to get you into that neutral zone at least. For example, I don't know anybody who's thrilled about making a change. After all, change can be viewed as stressful and perhaps even negative. However, people feel excited about making some improvements in their life. So instead of saying, I'm going to make some big changes in my life, and oh my God, that just gets me all stressed out to say for you, I recommend, I'm going to make an improvement. By doing that, you're setting the stage for yourself in your mood. If you're taking on upsetting negative words, you'll feel that way. If you're saying, I'm going to make an improvement, by saying that, you're actually taking the edge off of the stress of thinking about change because you're referring to it as an improvement, and certainly you're going to look forward to that. You can say to yourself, I have a problem. That feels somewhat upsetting to say. So instead, you can say, now I have a chance and an opportunity to do things better. If you're like most people, you'll feel more enthused about opportunities rather than problems. So again, upsetting word can be a problem. Upbeat word can be opportunity. You can feel overwhelmed and you can feel challenged. You can feel nervous or you can feel concerned. Upsetting words can be nervous versus concerned. You can have a problem or you can have an opportunity. You can feel overwhelmed or you can feel challenged. Be confident that you can figure things out. Technique number 4 was exude upbeat attitudes. You are today where your thoughts have brought you. You will be tomorrow where your thoughts take you. That's a quote, famous quote by James Allen. Here's the key, the most important bit of information for you to feel optimistic. Optimistic people focus on solutions. Pessimistic people focus on complaining, and it's really that simple. Remember last week we talked about the rule of 3, meaning the rule of 3 was IDKs. People come to me for intensive life coaching, usually walk into my office moaning and complaining, and with a couple minutes I say something like this. I know the situation is difficult for you, and it's been a while of struggle. What do you think your possible solution is right now? They often look at me and say, I don't know. And I ask them a second time, what's your possible solution? How can this problem get fixed or resolved? And they respond, I don't know. I don't know, doc. Finally, I ask them a third time, and they more slowly and seriously say to me, Dr. Mary, I don't know. After that, I give them the rule of 3, which means they can only say, I don't know, 3 times in the session. They look at me shocked, and then they smile, and they say, no one's ever told me that. No one's ever told me to watch how many times I DK myself before when I was looking for help. This awareness immediately breaks the helpless IDK pattern. As a result, they dramatically redirect their energy and focus on solving a problem rather than complaining and acting helpless about it. Suddenly, tough problems and challenges in your life become more approachable and solvable. So, next time you find yourself complaining, stop yourself in your tracks and say to yourself, what's my possible solution? So observe yourself. When you find yourself complaining, watch for your response of IDK. When you see yourself, hear yourself saying, I don't know, hear yourself and say, well, what's my possible solution? Doing this puts you on the road to optimism, feeling more control in your life. So you can focus on solutions rather than complaining. It's such an easy solution. So remember, your attitude can be upsetting, which is complaining, or upbeat, which is solving. You can focus on drawbacks or you can focus on opportunities. Another good way you can stop complaining is to talk about what we touched on last week, was happiness by the numbers, optimism and happiness by the numbers. A simple way to become hopeful and less of a complainer is to count your way to more positive thoughts. It's easy to become an expert switching your negative and bad thoughts to more positive or upbeat thoughts and feelings. All you need to do is focus on counting and switching your upsetting thoughts to more uplifting thoughts. So just observe yourself. Don't criticize yourself, please. Just observe how many times a day you have a negative thought. Each time you have a negative thought, immediately switch it to a positive thought or solution to your problems. Each time you have a negative thought, immediately switch it to a positive thought or solution to your woes. Write a check mark or tally mark on a pad of paper each time you switch like this every day. Your goal is to decrease the number of times you need to switch. At first, you may need to switch 20 to 50 times a day, but in time they'll decrease every day. For example, at first you may need to switch 50 times a day. In time, you'll decrease it to 20, 30, or even 10 times a day. If you're obsessively negative, you'll become obsessively positive using this technique. Paying attention to how often you complain is an eye-opening and sometimes shocking situation. These reactions are a great experience because they will motivate you to change. Moving on today to the next 60-second optimism technique is technique number 5, be a role model. Let me tell you a story to illustrate this technique of being a role model. So to illustrate it, let me tell you a story about somebody I know. Her name is Victoria. Throughout her life, Victoria called her names. As a baby, Victoria fell down the basement's flight of stairs and was injured. Her parents rushed her to the physician's office. The doctor told Victoria's parents that she was slightly damaged. Throughout grammar school, Victoria had difficulties with learning and academics. Victoria teachers called her parents and told them that she was, quote, slow. The teachers even put Victoria into a slow learning group, and that's what they called it, quote, slow learning group. Victoria felt humiliated. She often fell behind academically, and throughout grammar school, she fell behind academically. Victoria went on to high school, and in high school, of course, she still had difficulty with learning and academics. Starting freshman year, she began hanging around with popular students who also were troublemakers. Her teachers called her parents and said Victoria was, quote, troubled. Victoria was, quote, delinquent. Victoria would hang around what she thought were cool students, but it contributed to her getting into trouble. In her senior year of high school, Victoria met a teacher who somehow felt the potential in Victoria and helped her become more interested in learning. This teacher was incredibly supportive and gave her creative assignments at first and followed gradually with a little more challenging ones. They often, many times a week, would talk after class. Victoria loved meeting with her teacher and often looked forward to it. And it eventually led to her becoming more excited about these assignments that were given to her, and she began to work hard on them. Victoria and her teacher were proud of her work. Her teacher was an optimistic role model and encouraged her greatly. Soon from this wonderful experience, Victoria decided she wanted to go to college. In a meeting with her guidance counselor, the guidance counselor exclaimed, Victoria, you're not college material. And with your grades and student ranking, no four-year college will accept you. Victoria's heart sunk, and she left her guidance counselor's office in tears. To this day, quite a few years later, people still call Victoria names. Today, they continually call her Doctor. Dr. Mary Ann Victoria Mercer, your podcast host. Are you surprised? How did I overcome such challenges? The key is that even with many possible obstacles and difficulties, I remained an optimistic person deep down in my heart. I often dreamed of a better life than what my grandparents and parents had experienced in their lives. Sometimes people called me a dreamer. Well, I kept dreaming and I kept working hard. And I found ways to get around these obstacles. And to hear more of those details, you can go to my earlier podcast about the Victoria story and the lessons learned from the Victoria story. But for now, let my story be a role model for you to learn how to overcome obstacles. Then as you succeed, you can serve as a role model of an optimistic person for your family, friends, coworkers, and anyone else who's in your life. As you show people how you succeed using optimistic can-do approach techniques, you can help yourself as well as others. Remember that if you have children, they're watching how you handle difficulties and challenges. It takes little effort to drag your feet in life and be a plague to yourself and those around you. A truly exceptional person serves as a role model for all of those around them. So what you can do right now is list a few people for whom you could serve as a role model for an optimistic, can-do human being. These people may be family members, children, friends, coworkers, employees. Write down one action you frequently can do in front of them so that they'll see you in action as an optimistic person. Remember, practicing these techniques will make you feel more optimistic and confident. As a result, you'll find it easier to make changes you desire or even bounce back in your life after problems and difficult times. Here's a key to being optimistic that I would like to share with you. Here's another key trait you should practice toward becoming more upbeat and optimistic. You can spend a year studying all the research, philosophy, tactics used by people to succeed in their lives. When you finish your in-depth study, you can sit back and ponder this question. So what is the common thread that runs through most happiness and life success stories? The answer is very clear. The answer is that optimistic people and people who succeed in their life are incredibly self-responsible. This is my rule of responsibility. The more responsibility you take for everything you do and feel, the happier and more successful you will be. The less responsibility you take for your life, the more likely you will feel pessimistic, worried, and perhaps even out of control. And it's really that simple. Unhappy, unsuccessful people avoid taking responsibility for their lives, actions, thoughts, and feelings. How do they do that? Well, they resort to two very irresponsible behaviors. They want, demand, expect, and manipulate others to take care of them, and they spend much of their energy and time searching for giveaways or the easy way out. And second, they blame all sorts of people and situations for their predicaments, not their own behavior. I call this irresponsible-itis. It's a bad habit that leads to a terrible disease. Later in this podcast, I will show you how to become more responsible for your life and release what I call agony angers that hold you back, such as blaming others for your life. This is one of many agony anchors that can hold you back to making changes and coping with difficulties in your life. How to put these tips into perspective and why they work so well? They work so well because scientifically, you can only have one thought at a time in your mind. The key to feeling optimistic, enjoying your life, and fulfilling your vision for a delightful life is this: you can only keep one thought in your head at a time. This is the most powerful and under-publicized insight in psychology. Your question is probably this: so what should your one thought be? My answer is, dwell on what you want to accomplish. Do not dwell on what you don't want. This is the easiest way to keep negative thoughts out of your mind. You crowd them out. After all, if you keep thinking positive, optimistic, and uplifting thoughts, you can't at the same time focus on negative, depressing, or upsetting thoughts. It's all about where you put your focus. It's all about where you put your focus and energy towards. Intriguing research even shows that people who focus on positive experience can put up with more discomfort than people who do not dwell on positive, pleasant thoughts. Eventually, by putting this concept into action, you'll weed out any sprouting negative thoughts and feelings. To see how magnificently this essential works, do 2 experiments with yourself. First, the next time a negative thought crosses your path, immediately think of your goals or a delightful experience. Second, do random checks on your thoughts. A few times during the next few days, please occasionally pause or reflect. Check and see if you're thinking pessimistic thoughts. Check to see if you're thinking optimistic thoughts. If you're thinking negative thoughts, you know what to do now. Finally, as we talked about earlier, I had received some questions from listeners, which I love, and I picked one question because it really set into light or put into light what you might be also experiencing while listening to this podcast and practicing these techniques that I'm teaching you about. It really shows you where you might run into some blocks or resistance or that you can feel in yourself. So the question from the listener is this. They said, I love your optimism techniques and I started practicing them. I'll keep trying to practice them. In the meantime, I just was wondering, how long will it take for these techniques to become a habit? This question and the way it was phrased reveals a lot. Number 1, the person used the word try, using the word try. Number 2, this person started to focus on worrying and not on the process or being in the present moment about the process. And the worry about how long it will take gave me a sense of giving up too soon, as habits can take 4 to 6 weeks to become more natural. Let me get into more detail here. Watch what you say and never say the word try. To begin acting happy and optimistic, you need to learn what they do. Optimistic people act and talk in certain ways, as I've been talking to you about. For example, they use certain words, and we now know words can affect your mood and your energy levels. So changing your words can actually change your attitude and feelings. For example, we talked about I feel overwhelmed or I can feel challenged. Interesting, in my own research, I found one of the most interesting differences between happy and unhappy people is that happy people rarely use the word try. In fact, they rarely use the word try or but. These 2 words leave people feeling hopeless and not in control of their lives. Happy people feel hopeful and take tons of responsibility for their lives. The words try and but are excuses, and unhappy people have a bad case of excuse-itis. So stop using the word try. It's very disempowering. Get your power back by eliminating the word try and eliminating the word but. I'm sure if you think about it, how many times have you heard people say, I feel excited about this project, but it may take a long time to get done. Anytime the word but is introduced in a sentence, when someone's talking to you, you can always think to yourself, they're never going to do that. Or they'll say, I'll try to get it done, or I'll try to come to your party. You know very well, when people say try, it's never going to happen. And number 2, this person was worried about the whole process of, how long is this going to take? Am I doing this right? Don't focus on worrying. Worrying is a big energy zapper. When you're finding yourself worried about the process of doing these changes, immediately switch it to practicing one of these 60-second techniques, because worrying about the process just drains your energy. Replacing it with one of these 60-second techniques is more empowering, and it'll give you more enthusiasm about your life. And number 3, how long is this going to take? To me, that just feels like another worry about giving up too soon that this person wrote about. And it brings up a really good point to remind you all that are listening, is that these are 60-second techniques and they're easy to do. You need to repeat them because repetition is the mother of learning. It's just like going to the gym. When you're doing reps, you get stronger and stronger, but you have to keep practicing. Habits of any type take 4 to 6 weeks to become more natural. A lot of podcast hosts and people in the media say, well, it takes 2 to 4 weeks to become a habit. I hardly agree with that, and I disagree wholeheartedly. It takes 4 to 6 weeks of constantly repeating these 60-second techniques without judgment. Just keep practicing for 4 to 6 weeks and it'll become more and more natural. I suggest see what thoughts you're having about my episodes on changing your life and these 60-second tips to practice, helping you set the stage and get more confident in making your life better. Check what your reactions are and please email me and be honest about that so I can help you better. Because yes, change requires work and effort. I'm offering what I've learned as a psychologist working with clients for years and from researching studies after studies for my book in the field of psychology, for my book, Spontaneous Optimism. If you want to have more information on all the details about these research articles and the research that backs up my tips, get a copy of my book, Spontaneous Optimism. I'm not going to go into all the research here, just the ones that are easy to demonstrate via these podcasts. But if you want to read about them, they're in my book, Spontaneous Optimism. Like the title of this episode was Optimism Habits Made Easy. I'm breaking down these into easy steps for you. Remember these techniques for the next few weeks and notice the shift in you. Remember, watch your words, what words you use. Watch your outlook on life, especially when problems pop up. Watch your voice tone and posture as we discussed. Let go of worry. Trust the process. Let me know how you're doing using these 60-second techniques. Next time, we're going to talk about the characteristics of resilient and hardy people and what they can teach you, as well as building habits for change. So in the meantime, please go to my website, PositiveLifeAnswers.com, and sign up for your free Positive Life Answer newsletter. That can be a support to these podcasts, and it's completely free. And when you sign up, you'll receive this free initial guide called Quick Tips to Become More Upbeat and Optimistic. While you're at my website, please feel free to email me your questions and comments using the Contact Us form on my website. Or you can email me directly at drmercer@positivelifeanswers.com. That's Dr. Mercer at PositiveLifeAnswers.com. drmercer@PositiveLifeAnswers.com. I will respond to your questions and comments during my podcast. Now, please don't forget to sign up for my weekly podcast so you'll be informed every time there's a new episode that comes up. So please, on your podcast platform, press that tab called Follow and Download so that you won't miss any of the future podcasts. So let's create a positive domino effect by our work in these weekly podcasts. And a note to my listeners, this podcast aims to provide useful information to my listeners. It's published with the understanding that your host, Dr. Mercer, myself, me, is not engaged in rendering professional services such as counseling or therapy through the contents of this podcast. If you need more professional services such as counseling or psychotherapy or medical advice, then the listener is responsible for seeking the services of a competent professional or therapist. Please contact your local psychological association or contact your doctor for a referral in your area. Now, don't forget to practice your 60-second optimism habits and techniques. Stay tuned for more. I look forward to talking with you again. Positively, Dr. Mary.